Welcome to today's session. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's program, please use the contact information or help icon at the bottom of the screen. As a reminder, this call is being recorded, and the archive will be made available following the event. Before we begin, I would like to explain how continuing professional education credits will be awarded for this session. You must remain logged in for the entire program, and you must respond to at least 75% of the polling questions to be eligible for credit. You must also be individually logged onto today's program, meaning one person per computer. Group participation will not receive credit. Submit your questions using the Q&A dialog box that is open on your console. Lastly, your completion status of pass or fail will be reflected in MyGTU 1 to 2 hours after the webcast ends. The CPE credit will not be applied to your transcript until it is processed by the CPE team within 60 days of the webcast's completion. For best viewing results, we recommend that you use a wired internet connection. Also, please make sure all other applications are closed and your pop-up blocking software has been disabled for optimal viewing. If for any reason you need to refresh this console, you may press F5 to do so. For T460 models, you'll need to use Function plus F5. A few helpful features to note. Use the resource button to download a copy of today's presentation materials. Use the help icon if you have technical difficulties, or contact the webcast platform provider at 877-398-9939 or by email at gtwebcast@centurylink.com.
Hello, I'm Leo Levo, Controls Advisory Manager for the Chicago office. We're going to start the Oracle database training now. I also would like to thank Jeremy Huval and Gita Kaipa for helping me with slides. The learning objectives for this training is to describe the Oracle database architecture and some of the technology associated with it. Talking a little bit about security, roles, profiles, passwords, and other configurations related to the Oracle. It's important to note that this training is not specific for ITGCs or attestation work or SOC work. This is just an overview of the security administration for Oracle databases. So it can be, this is applicable across the board for all the IT work that's Oracle database. So the agenda for this training, I divided this training into 3 topics. So just some basic database concepts, just introduction to databases. Then we're going to discuss about the typical architecture of Oracle database. This is going to be technical, and we're going to present some of the technical things about how the typical Oracle database is structured. And finally, we're going to talk about the security concepts for Oracle database and how you can get files out of the Oracle database and how you can check security administrations and privileges into a. So starting with some of basic database concepts. So the first question is, what is a database? So a database is basically a collection of information. That's a repository for data that can be accessed by users or applications. Usually, most of the applications that we commonly encounter on clients like SAP, PeopleSoft, Oracle EBS, and others, they work into a 3-layer architecture. And one of these layers is the database. So the database becomes critical to be assessed from a security perspective, just to mitigate any risk that anyone can manipulate data directly into the database. So each database has the specifics, and Oracle is no different. So it's important to know the basic of the Oracle structure and architecture in order to review the security access and security parameters for the database and make sure that only the appropriate people and appropriate individuals have access, and they have the risks or the controls around the database to mitigate risks such as changing data or losing data. There are a few types of databases. Oracle is a relational database. I'm not talk a lot about this. So the next slide, we're just going to explain a little bit about what a relational database is. So basically, a relational database gets the data and stores the data into tables. And within these tables, we have rows and columns. And different tables within the database, they have a relationship between them. So it's easier for an application or a user to get the data that is needed and visualize that data in different forms. There is almost a limited number of ways to combine tables and columns. So this is just a flow of how relationship database works. So basically, we have different tables here, and we have different fields or different columns, and they have a relationship between them. So table A and table B, we have one column or one field with a relationship. And from table B to table C, we have two different columns. So we always going to have relationship between tables. So we're going to have like key columns or key fields to make a relationship between them. And we can have more than one field to make this relationship. This is just some comparison between the most used databases that we have. So we have Oracle, MySQL, and SQL Server. So all of them, except for SQL Server, obviously, they run in several operating systems. So Oracle is capable of running in Windows and OS X and Linux and Unix distributions. So differently from SQL Server that can only be used on a Windows platform, the Oracle database gives the user more flexibility around what operating system support a database. The interface with the database, and we're going to talk more about this training, but the interface with Oracle can be done through some tools like SQL Plus, which is an Oracle tool, Toad, or any other application through ODbc connections. And we're going to discuss more about ODbc connections. So we have like our first question. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to answer that. Okay, we have close to 90% of the answers. So, all right, that's false. So, in a relational database, you can have multiple fields to be used as key and have a relationship with other tables. So it's not a one-to-one relationship; it's an end-to-end relationship. So there is no limit on how many fields or how many columns I'm going to use to have a relationship with another table. All right, so we discussed a little bit about databases, and you probably heard this before because we had like other trainings related to databases. So let's start talking specifically about Oracle and the typical architecture that Oracle has. So this might seem a little confusing, but we're going to go through each one of the components that you see here. But this is the basic Oracle architecture. So, and all these components that you see on your screen right now is what is called an instance. So when we talk about instance in Oracle, we're talking about all these components. And again, we're going to discuss that later. But when we're talking about instance, when talking about Oracle, that's the same as the database. So differently from SQL Server, for example, where you can have one instance and several databases within that instance. In Oracle, one instance is one database, not have multiple databases within one. So we're going to start to discuss a little bit about each one of these components right now. So the first component that we would like to discuss is the schema. So the schema is just a collection of logical structures of data, such as tables. And each schema is assigned or owned by a database user. And each user has only one schema. So in other words, schema is the same as user when we're talking about Oracle. Security objects or system objects, so roles and profiles and other system-related objects, they are not assigned to a schema. Every other object in Oracle, such as tables and visualizations or any other thing, is assigned to a schema. So it's assigned to a specific user. This is just a flow of what the schema is. So as you can see, the user is the same as the schema, and the schema will have the user's name. So for example, if I have the user Leo in Oracle database, I'm going to have a schema Leo assigned to that user, and all the objects that I own will be assigned to the schema. The next concept is the instance, and I already talked about that. So every running Oracle database is associated to Oracle instance. So we're only going to have one instance per database. And when the database is started, or database server is started, the Oracle database allocates the memory, the RAM memory, to the SGA. So the SGA basically is what shares the memory and the server resources across all the Oracle objects, including schema, users, and processes. So when we're talking about an Oracle instance, we're actually talking about the whole picture, the whole database. So different environments and different applications, they will have their own. So for example, if you're assessing an application that has 3 different environments, dev, QA, and production, you're going to have 3 different instances for Oracle. And each instance will have its own access, its own users, its own schema, and its own objects. So just to be clear, differently from just make a comparison with SQL Server, where you can have one instance and all the 3 different databases within that instance, when we're talking about Oracle, you're always going to have 3 different instances of Oracle running fully separately. So There is no shared security access or security parameters among. The next topic is the SGA, or the System Global Area. So I mentioned that before. So the SGA is just the group of shared memory and resources from the server. So when you start the Oracle instance, you're going to start the SGA. So the SGA is going to get all the resources that are allocated for that instance, and that SGA object, or that SGA component, is responsible for sharing the resources among users, among the instance itself, objects. And so, for example, if you have a lot of users trying to visualize and to create tables and to make changes to tables and to add new records and modify things within the database, it's up to the SGA to regulate and share all the resources from the server among users and activities. Also important to know that each instance has its own SGA. So again, instance of Oracle or Oracle database is going to be completely independent, and each one is going to have its own SGA. So each instance is going to manage its own resources from the server. Just to be clear, you can have multiple instances within the same server. The next topic are the processes. So processes are basically what the user is doing. So when, for example, you request visualization, or you start to create a table, or you create a new record in a table within Oracle, you are creating a process. We have basically two different processes within Oracle. So we have application or Oracle processes. So those are processes that are owned by the database itself. So we're usually talking about processes that run on the background, or processes that are for maintenance, like recreating like indexes or anything like that. And we have application or Oracle process. So the application process is basically what the user is doing. So that's a user process. And the reason that we call that application process, and I'm going to discuss that a little bit further, is that only applications can make changes to the Oracle database. The user cannot connect directly to the database and make a change. So when we're talking about process, it's basically what the user is doing or what the Oracle database itself is doing. So background process, background activities. So this slide is just what I just said. So a process is anything that a user is doing, and Oracle database process is whatever the Oracle is running on the back. So logging services, system monitors, database writers, anything like that. The SGA is just how Oracle manages the memory and resources from the server among like the users and the process and the database. And the instance is the collection of the SGA, the process, the schemas, the users, the data, everything. So again, just clear, one instance is one database. So talking about different structures on Oracle. So when I talk about Oracle, we're going to have basically two different structures, the physical and the logical structure. The physical structure is how the data files are stored in the OS. So everything that you have in the Oracle database will be stored at the operating system level somehow. And the way it happens, there are basically two different types of data files for Oracle, and I'll show that in minutes. But basically, you're going to have all your database structure, all your data, tables, visualizations, users, roles, profiles, everything that you have on the Oracle database is stored OS level as data files. It's important to know that these data files, you cannot change these data files using, for example, Notepad or any other tool than Oracle. Only the Oracle database can read and write to those files. Nevertheless, it's important to assess the security, the operating system security around these files, just to make sure that, for example, we have like regular backups that no one can enter into the folders or directories and just delete these files because we will be deleting essential Oracle database to read. Logical structures are how Oracle will manage the different components. So basically, it's how Oracle reads all these physical structure files, and it's going to show it to you. So we're talking about tables, schemas, users, roles. So all of these components, they are logical structures within. This slide shows this. So when we have the logical structure, we have like the database and all the table space, the segments, any kind of object that is owned by that Oracle database, schemas, profiles, roles, and all of that is stored in data files in the structure. And when I say physical structure, we're talking about the operating system. The other type of file that Oracle works with is the Oracle data. So basically, we're talking about logs and also some of the it's going to produce, and that's going to be stored in different type of file that's called OS block. This type of file is pretty much the same as a data file. It just has like a different format, and it's also stored on the OS level. Moving forward, now we're going to talk about application security. So the Oracle database does not allow direct user interaction. What this means is you're always going to have an application or a system or a tool or another program interacting with the Oracle database. It's never going to be the user directly interacting with it. So just as an example, if you compare with KODv2 database running in series server, you can have the user interacting directly objects and everything else in that database straight from the operating system. This does not happen to Oracle. You need to have a tool or system or application connected to the Oracle database through ODBC connection. So what is an ODBC connection? ODBC is for open database connectivity. So it's just a protocol that was created to allow other applications to connect with databases and interact with databases. So in order to use Oracle or to do like change into the Oracle database, you need to be connected through ODBC. So this is a middle layer between the user and directly that is called database driver. So we have like the definition here. which is the ODBC manages this by inserting a middle layer called the database driver between an application and the database system. The purpose of this layer is to translate the application's data queries into comments that the MS understands. So again, it's just a middle layer that will translate whatever comment you're to the system or to that application to a language that Oracle database will understand. So there is no direct connection to Oracle. So this is showing exactly how the ODBC works. So we have a user connected to either an application or a utility. So when we're talking about applications, we can talk about Oracle, EBS, SAP, PeopleSoft, any sort of application or system that would be the Oracle database, or to a utility or to a tool, SQL Plus or Toad. Those are the database management systems for Oracle. So again, you need to connect through ODBC connection to the Oracle database. This has one benefit because it's going to add two different security layers to the database or to secure the data. So the first layer is going to be the Oracle database security. So as a user, you're going to have to authenticate yourself, get access to changes to the Oracle database through an application. And you also have to, usually, to authenticate through the application to changes. So when we're talking about a system, SAP for example, we're going to have the user authenticating to SAP, and we're going to have the SAP authenticating into the Oracle database to make that change. So that's a difference from some of the other databases that allows users to get directly connected to the database to make changes. So we're going to have another question now. Let's answer the question. Okay, so people already answered. So the answer is that's false. You always need to connect through an application or utility. All right, so now we're going to start talking about Oracle security. So we're going to get a little bit into the specifics about Oracle security and some of the Oracle concepts. These slides will be available to you, so there is like a lot of information in the slides, so don't bother to take notes right now or to try to write down the SQL statements that are in a few of the slides or everything. You can use this material as a reference after that. And just to know, so since I am presenting alone, I will compile all the questions that you have and we'll send that in a separate email next week. So please feel free to send any kind of questions through the Q&A here, and I will answer those later. So starting on the security concepts. So we're going to have four different concepts here. So we're going to talk first about like parameters, database links, roles and privileges, and the audit trails. So again, you don't have to worry about writing this down right now. There are a lot of long names here involved, so you can always use this presentation for reference later. So starting with parameters. So parameters on Oracle, we have a few files where you're going to define the database parameters. And by parameters, you can imagine any kind of configuration for the database. So that goes from password parameters and definitions to a more technical and performance-related parameters on Oracle. So the first file that we're going to talk about, and some of you already know about this file, is the init.aura. So this is the initial parameter file that is created by the DBA after it defines the overall instance configuration. So this file here, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this file specifically. It's more related about performance and memory allocation or resources allocation, where the files are going to be stored, and some internal optimization parameters. So there are no security parameters definitions in this file. The reason we're talking about it is sometimes we may have some internal audit specific project that will require us to maybe review database performance or to verify how the DBAs are managing the database. So if you are in one of these projects where you to review performance or database parameters, ensure that parameters are within a configuration database or configuration changes are properly made and they are stored in a proper configuration database or a configuration change, you may want to take a look at this file and see how they are managing this file. But for most of the work that we generally do, so IT general roles for IT audit or SOX, internal audit, or a SOC report, this usually is not a file that we're SCI file. The next one is the listener, and this one can be risky. So we usually don't this file, at least for perspective, but this is a configuration file for the connections request over the network. So basically, it's going to manage the ODBC connections. So this is basically a configuration file that has like all the connections or connection requests that a database receives over the network. But there is one value that we should start reviewing. And the file and the parameter is called password listener. So why this parameter specifically is a risk? Well, this parameter allows connection to use a default password to connect to the database. And although the ODBC connection to the Oracle database is encrypted, so the password will not be sent over a flat file or unprotected connection, the password that is set in this file is open text. So when you open the listener.aura file, you should look for the password listener parameter and check if it's set to no password, which is the Oracle default, or if or if there is a password set in there. So if you see that the file is no longer with the default parameter, I mean, there is a password in there, you should make some assessments around the security to that file. So, for example, if we were talking about a Windows operating system, a Windows environment, you should verify that the folder that contains this file is not open to everyone. So this folder should be restricted to IT people and even possible restricted to only security administrators. So this is just showing you just of the listener.aura. And there is another information here about the port 1. So the port 1521 is the default port for database connection. This should be changed because most of the attacks and cybersecurity side, most of the attacks they're going to happen through standard or default. So this is not usually something that we review, well, like the ITGC or regular SOX internal audit work, but might be something that you want to keep in mind. So if you are ever performing some different internal audit function or a specific review of an Oracle database, this is probably going to be something that you should check just to see if the 15th port was changed on the list. The next parameter that we're going to talk about is the $v parameter, and this is a parameter within Oracle. We're not talking about a file. So the other two parameters that we discussed, they are actual files on the operating system. The $v parameter is a parameter within the Oracle database. So this parameter is going to show you information about the initialization parameters that are currently in fact for the session. And there are a few security parameters that we should start inspecting more regularly, and that includes ITGC. So we're going to discuss a little bit more about what parameters we should look. The V parameter, the $v parameter, is a very long file, so there are about 1,000 or a little over 1,000 different parameters that can be set here. On the next slides, we're going to discuss a little bit about some of the risky parameters, but there are other parameters as well. If you have questions about what parameters you should review or if this parameter is appropriate, feel free to contact me, or all the documentation about this, all those parameters, they are also available on the Oracle library. So if you go to oracle.com, you have access to Oracle database library, and all the parameters, explanations, and recommended settings, they are all in there. So these are just a few of the parameters that were security relevant for. So we have here some of the recommended values. Again, no need to take notes right now, but have these slides at hand when you're working with Oracle, because these are some of the that you want to. So remote login password file. So it specifies if the Oracle checks for a password file. There is like no recommended value. Actually, this is for the most recent versions of, but for some of old 9 and below, to use remote OS roles, auto trail. So auto trail is definitely a parameter check. So the auto trail parameter is going to tell you if the database auditing changes, modifications, access, or anything like that. So the value that you should find for the auto trail is OS, what means that Oracle database is storing all the logs into the OS level. So for example, if I am a DBA into an Oracle database, I should not have admin access to the OS level, to the folder where the logs are stored. So I cannot make a change to Oracle database and go into the file and delete. So always make sure that if you are relying database logs, that you are verifying the segregation of duty access for DBAs and where the auto trails files are stored on the. Another important note about the auto trail. So only having the auto trail turned on does not mean that Oracle is logging anything. So in order to Oracle to start logging changes, and we're going to talk about logging later today, but in order to Oracle to log activities in the system and the database, you need to have this auto trail turned on, and you also need to have the logging parameters defined. So for example, if you have this option turned on, but you do not have any auto trail parameters defined, you will have no logs for that Oracle database. The other way is also true. So you have auto trail parameters defined, but this parameter is turned off, you're also not going to have. A few more parameters that should be. So I'm not going to go through time, but feel free to contact me if you have questions about specific parameters. So here we have like another question. So I'm going to give you the question. Okay, we have 95% of the answers. So take a look. Right. I guess this was a little bit tricky question. So the right answer is actually C. So the database driver is a middle layer between the application and the database management system. And the purpose of this layer is to translate the application's data queries into comments that the DB sends. So I know it was a kind of a tricky question, but that's pretty much the definition of fee connection. So remember that when we're talking about the middle layer, we're talking about the database driver. And everything about the database driver is about the application. So it's getting the queries or the requests from the application and translating it to something that the DBMS or Oracle will understand and perform. So here we have like answer. All right, so let's keep moving and let's talk a little bit about the links. So talking about the database links, so there are two tables that are important when we're talking about the database links. So we have the DBA DB links and the user. It's actually users as missing there. So users DB links. So basically, these two tables they're gonna log and mark all the connections to that database. So what database link is being used, what's the host, and when this is created. So it might be, again, not used every time we're talking about regular ITGC procedures or SOX internal audit, but that might be something useful if you are doing more deep dive into our audit. So these two files could be used to review connections and logs for connected to the database connection. The other file is the $PW files. So sorry. So it's a $PW file users. That's the view list users who have been granted CIS DBA and CIS Opera privileges from the password file. So we're going to discuss a little bit more about CIS DBA and CIS Opera privileges later. But basically, this is a user list that you should be verifying. So the CIS DBA is sort of a super user for Oracle database. Sorry, not super user, it's the super privilege. So privileges are assigned to users, as we're going to see. And the CIS Opera is not as powerful as DBA, but the thing that they have in common is that they both can access the files when the Oracle database shut down. So they can make changes or they can start shutting down, backup, or over the database. So these two privileges are admin privileges, and they are required to perform high-level admin operations. Again, we have like some examples on the slide. So creating, starting up, shutting down database, backing up, recovering databases. So these are database management privilege. So that should be restricted only to the DBAs. No other user should have access to any Oracle database, only the DBA. So this is just a little more. So like I said, gives you some versions over like what action you can database and perform some high level. The next one is the remote access. So there is this parameter remote OS authentication. If that's set as true, then the account will bypass database authentication. So this is a parameter and stable $PW users that should always be set as false. So when you set this parameter as true, the accounts will bypass database authentication. So you are actually losing a security layer. So basically what this is doing is to create a direct, not a direct connection, but to bypass any security restrictions or any authentication from Oracle. This should be set as false. Next are the audit trails. So what the audit trail is. So certain audit sends output to two locations, so to the database and OS level. So when we're talking about audit trails in Oracle, the data, the logs, they are actually stored to the OS level. So what these mean is the DBA should not be able to access the OS and make changes to those logs. So we need to restrict the access, the DBA access, to domain admins or root accounts or special authorizations, depending on the system you're talking about, to the location where the logs are stored. The standard audit records are written only if the two conditions are true. So so we need to have the visualization parameter audit trail turned on, and the events or the audit trail parameters should be set. And the way you set the parameter trails is through the SQL command called audit. So, and this is the last bullet point here, something important. So regardless of the audit trail setting, no actions when connected as CSDBA are audited by the auditor. So just like we discussed in the slide about the SysDBA privilege, one of the reasons that this privilege should be extremely restricted is because there is no audit trail for it. So whoever is connected using a SysDBA privilege will not be logged, regardless of the activity. There are other tools that can circumvent that. So, for example, if using Idera, or Pact, or database logging tool that could be used to log the activities for SysDBA. But if they are only using Oracle logging, you should assess that in order to rely logs, only the appropriate to the have access or had access to the SysDBA. And just some more information about the audit trail parameter, like I said before. So there are three values that parameter, and that parameter is the one discussed on the file. It can be set to DB, less, or off. So when you set that for, saying is to Oracle to log all the audit trails into the database itself. So why this is not a very good idea? Well, you're trying to log mainly the activities from privileged users. So if you are a privileged user and the audit trail is being logged into the database itself, and just go into that table and delete as you want. So that's the reason is to set the value to OS. So Oracle or logs and the audit trails at the OS level, database level. So you have segregation of duties and access segregation between administrators. You can mitigate the risk of having a TA doing something they should not do and deleting logs or manipulating somehow. So we're going to talk about like the next table. It's the DBA OBJ audit OS. So again, long name. Don't bother to write it down right now. But this is basically the table that is going to tell you what objects are being logged and what kind of log is happening to that object. So when we're talking about Oracle, the logging can get very, very granular, and you can set up only to certain tables or certain objects to be logged, and how they're going to log is can also set. So there is a query that you can send to your clients to get this information. So if you select, everything from that specific table, you're going to get something like what we're showing below here. So we also included what, so if you have something set as S, that indicates that the audit option is set by session. So, and we're going to discuss that in a few moments, what session and by access means, and how they are going to log. So whenever successful or whenever not successful. So it means if you're going to log activities when they happen or when they do not happen. So for example, if you're looking for audit trails, access audit trails, and you set that for successful only, you're only going to log the users that manage to connect to the database. You will not view if there was a user that got, for example, the password wrong. So from a security perspective, you want to have both of that. So you can see who connected and who got denied. So you can verify if there is anyone trying to attack the database by trying to guess the password or using brute force. So a little more information about the columns that we're going to have in that table. So when we're talking about auditing by session, Oracle is going to produce just a single audit trail record per audit option, regardless the number of successful or unsuccessful attempts within that session. That means if you try to, and let's get back to access, just an example. If you try to access 1,000,000 times Oracle and you fail because you don't know the password, Oracle will only produce one log or one record showing that you tried to access the database. So this is, for example, from a security standpoint, this is not exactly useful because we only know that you try to log at least once and fail. For security purposes, what I need to know is by access. So every time you try to log into the Oracle database and fail, that's going to generate a new record into the audit trail file so I can know exactly how many times you try to connect. fail. So depending on the object that you're auditing, you may want to have it by session and for success, or by session on failure, maybe by access, by success and failure. So it's actually going to depend on the object that you're looking at, and what are you trying to get out of this information. So if it's something for security purpose, or if it's something change management purpose. So make sure that you get this file from the client and review objects that you are deemed critical for your work. Just make sure that the audit trails are valid and they are capturing whatever they should be capturing to a decision level, so you can rely on. Okay, so another table here, the DBA SCMT audit OPS. So this is just bringing description of the columns. So this is just a different table, Oracle. So this is going to show you the auditing parameters, users that contain statement privilege. So that means write, update, create, anything greater than on. So you can actually define what user is going to get an audit trail. So when I talk about audit trails in Oracle, keep in mind that the definition can get very, very granular. And you can set up the Oracle database to log only what you want. The same concepts apply here. So success and failure, access, and session. Another question. So auditing by session produces a single audit trail record, true or false? I'm going to give you the answer to that. Okay. Everyone answered already. So yeah, that's true. So when we're talking auditing by session in Oracle, that's going to produce just a single audit trail record. When we're talking about by access, that's going to produce every time an audit trail. Just another thing to keep in mind about trails is audit trails, they grow fast. So some of you may ask, okay, so why people just don't log everything Oracle by access and by success and failure, so we have like everything? Well, this is going to take a lot of space to store. So the audit trails are going to grow fast, and the end, it's going to be kind of impossible to read everything, or to even get or to even analyze the data. I have like a few clients that have like database entering systems that try to audit everything, and it's quite impossible to get any information. So it's important to, anytime you are reviewing logs from Oracle, just make sure that you're reviewing the parameters as well. But keep in mind that parameters should be enough to give you good precision level for your analysis, but don't expect to have everything logged into the database because the audit trails are going to grow fast. Okay, now we get into the last part. So we're going to talk about roles and privileges in Oracle. So when we're talking about privileges in Oracle, a system privilege, it gives the user a right to perform a specific task or a specific operation in the database. So when we're talking about privileges, for example, grant is to give access to a user. That's one privilege. Create, that's another privilege. So Oracle privileges, they are defined, and each privilege allows you to do only one task. When we're talking about object privileges, so object privileges allows the user to do a specific task to a specific object. So access in Oracle, it gets really granular because you can provide system privileges or object privileges. So system privileges can only be granted by DBA or someone who specifically has that permission. And we're going to talk more about that, but you can grant permissions directly to users or to roles. So keep in mind that differently from some other systems and softwares where you to assign a role to a user, and when we're talking about Oracle, you can assign a privilege directly to the user. So every time you are reviewing Oracle listings, access lists, make sure that you are reviewing that by permission and not by role. If you're reviewing that only by role, you may be missing some security access. So here we're talking about roles. So another way to grant privileges to users is through roles. So roles are basically just a group of privileges under a single name, and you can assign them to a user. So for example, we can just create, let's say, a display only role into Oracle and assign that to users. So all the users that have that specific role assigned will only be able to display tables and not make any changes to the system. Again, I can assign individual permissions. So when you are reviewing the access for Oracle and you talk to the client and the client says, okay, this only the admin role can make changes to the database, well, make sure that you're reviewing the privileges and not that only specific role, because the DBA can assign privileges outside the roles. So always keep that in mind. So now we're gonna just talk about some of the tables that store roles and privileges. I'm not going to talk a lot about each one of them, but just so you know, you can, all the privileges and roles and user information is stored in Oracle tables. The tables and the description of the tables are in the slide, so again, use it for your own reference. And the slides are going to explain the relationship between tables. And later, I'm going to show you a tool that we have to make it easier for the tables. So first table is the DBA users. So that's the user master table. So we're going to have like all the users here, information about the account status, if it's locked or not, the expiration date, who created. So this is the main users. Another table that is important to review is the DBA users with staff password. So that means users with DBA access that have the default password. So any ITGC work you're doing, make sure that you are reviewing this table and asking the DBA to give you this table, so you can make sure that no DBA users are using the password. Next one, the DBA roles. So that's going to list all the roles in the database, including if it's a password requirer, or DBA role privs. So that's going to give you all the privileges by roles. DBA syspriv, so it's going to give you all the system privilege assignments in the database by role or by user. DBA tab privs, so it's going to give you the object level privilege assignments in the database. Again, roles or users. DBA profiles. So we didn't talk about profiles yet. So profiles in Oracle, they are basically related to security parameters. So the DBA profile table is where you're going to find your password parameters. Each user is assigned to a profile, and only one profile. If the user is not assigned to a specific profile or a customized profile, the user will be assigned to the profile called default. So by reviewing this table, that's how you're going to get the password settings that you need. So just have in mind, keep in mind that if a user is assigned to a profile that has no password parameters assigned, that means that that specific user do not have any password parameters or any password requirements to access the data. So just a flow of like the tables that we discussed thus far. So authorizations, DBA roles, DBA users, and how it the relationships to the DBA tab privs, sysprivs, and roles. So again, have in mind that privileges can be assigned both to roles and users. And another important thing, roles can also be assigned to other roles. So in order to make composite roles. So that means you can put like a role under another role, so the initial role will inherit all the access. So for example, if I have role A assigned to role B, when I assign role A to a user, the user is going to get all the privileges from role A and B. So this is just the SQL statements to get that we discussed. Discuss, so use this for your own one of your work. Other question. So roles can only be assigned to a user. So I'm going to give. Okay, we have over percent of the responses. So let's proceed. That's false. Yeah. So like I said, you can assign roles to other roles to make composite roles. So let's start talking a little bit about some tools that we have that can help you with field work when talking about Oracle. So we have the Oracle data extraction script and the Oracle security parser. So for any of you who are not familiar with our quick tools ribbon for Excel, if you have like any questions, you can talk to me or send an email to show you in a minute. But most of you should be very familiar with the quick tools. So the quick tools ribbon will give you some Oracle to use when you're. So the tools are optional to use, but we highly suggest that you do. They're gonna be used to analyze database level permissions, and they are compatible with all versions of Oracle as far. So the tools will not give you the work paper done. The tools will not give you, flag you any segregation of duty conflicts or anything like that. That's up to you. So the tool will only help you to analyze access. So if you do not have quick tools already or have questions about quick tools, so you can send an email address. And so basically, let's go back for a minute. So when you go to Quick Tools and PBC requests and click on the Oracle database script, it's going to show you, it's going to create an auto-generated email with a script on it. So the script will only extract these tables, the tables that we discussed before, so the tables that we need to review in order to get comfort around the security access for Oracle. And you can send that directly to the client so the client can run. So what are the benefits of using this? Well, we do not have to worry about completeness and accuracy for that, right? So if they use our own script, and of course we need to get like screenshots just to make sure that EBA used our script. But if they use our script, we can get like comfort around, okay, the data is completely accurate, and it's a very simple SQL statement. It's only exporting the data tables to a text file. So if the client does not want to run the script for any reason, you can just get this list of tables and ask them to extract that for you. It's going to be the same result. So each table is going to create its own text file. See here. And what you're going to do is get these text files, put all these text files into Excel. So make sure all the columns are correct. And you're going to access the the Oracle file parser. So what's going to do? Basically, it's going to do all the heavy lifting for you. So it's going to get all the security access out for you and show you in a very friendly way. So it makes your life easier when documenting everything in work papers. So this is an example of what the file parser is going to give you. So it's going to create 4 reports. It's all of the reports, they have this same look and feel. And the reports that it's going to create. So here you can see, for example, users with security administration access. So for your SA4C, if we were talking about ITGCs, for your SA4C, here are the system administrators for the Oracle database. And here you have like all the information. So all we have to do is to get this information and put. This is an example of the email that is auto-generated. So again, if the client do not want to run the script for any reason, all we have to do is to ask them to get a copy of tables down here. So again, this is just a step-by-step. So, identify your in-scope Oracle databases. Remember, one instance, one database, so identify your instances. For each one of the databases, you're going to ask them to run the SQL script. Remember, there are no shared security parameter or security access between databases. One instance, one database. You're going to load everything into Excel workbooks and just make sure you start in cell A1 and you have separate columns for each one of the file. And you're going to get everything on the same workbook in separate tabs. After that, all we have to do is run the parser from the IT auditing drop-down menu, and usually takes 2 or 3 minutes to run. And after that, you're going to have all the information. After that, you're going to examine the DBA users with that password table to identify if they have any sysadmin user that is still using the default password. And you may want to take a look at the DBA profiles table to test the database level authentication. So just make sure you're reviewing the profiles to get like your password complexity, account lockout, and all the other password parameters that to review. Last question here. Okay, almost everyone answered that, so let's forward because we're running out of time. Okay, so the answer is C. Yes, the use of quick tools are optional. So they are highly encouraged, so you should use the quick tool as much as you can. If you cannot for any reason, you don't have to. It's not a requirement. But always ask the engagement manager or the engagement partner if you're not using the tool or if you want to use the tool. So always ask them how path they will take, but you should be using this tool as much as possible because it's going to make your life way. Okay, so just to finish here, so when we're talking about Oracle databases, what we should consider. So let's try to leverage as much as possible the quick tools. Let's leverage as much as possible the data collection script that we have, and we can also use the email builder to request the script output. So I guess that's it. So again, if you have like any questions, please send that to the QA. I will receive these questions next week, and I will answer them and send the answer to all the attendees. So thank you very much for spending this Friday listening about the Oracle audit, and have a great weekend.
That concludes today's session. Thank you for sharing your insights today. Please take a few minutes to complete the online survey by clicking the evaluation link located in the Resource Center. By providing feedback, you are helping our presenters and learning and organizational effectiveness improve future webcasts. Lastly, your completion status of pass or fail will be reflected in MyGTU 1 to 2 hours after the webcast ends. The CPE credit will not be applied to your transcript until it is processed by the CPE team within 60 days of the webcast's completion. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.